Hey, this is John, and today I wanted to do just a short little screencast on how to basically create a swarm cluster on your OpenStack Cloud. So with Docker 1.12, a lot of this stuff is super easy now. I know there's a lot of mixed feelings and opinions out there about Docker and the swarm stuff being a part of the engine and everything, and Kubernetes. But for me, the swarm stuff works great. I've used it for a while. 112 made it just unbelievably easy, and I haven't had any issues. I don't have compatibility problems or anything like that, but my use cases are probably pretty trivial, so your mileage may vary, but for me, I'm a fan. It's worked out great. So today I wanted to kind of go through and show you how you can do things like pull in OpenStack with your Docker and kind of make them work together. So Docker has a thing called Docker Machine. Lets you plug in different providers for provisioning instances and stuff like that, or nodes, I guess. One of those drivers is an OpenStack driver. There's also Azure, VirtualBox, Rackspace, AWS, Google Compute, so all kinds of choices. So it's really good stuff. But I have an OpenStack Cloud, so I'm going to go through and I'm going to use that OpenStack Cloud. If we take a look here, you can see I've got this cloud running, and there's a bunch of stuff in there. Now over in this window, I've got a dmachine environment file. So with Docker Machine, what you're going to do is you're going to do docker-machine create -d to give it the driver, and then the name of the machine that you want to create. Now there's a whole list of options, as you would imagine, that can go into that. What I do here is I create this environment file that has the main options that I need. The OpenStack flavor ID and image ID are the two obvious ones, of course, right? And then you need your SSH user, your key pairs, stuff like that. One thing to keep in mind is on these key pairs, I have noticed that Docker Machine, when I build things up and tear them down, sometimes when I delete all of my Docker Machine images that I created, it will also remove the key from OpenStack. I haven't figured out what's going on there yet, if it's something in Gopher Cloud or in the Docker Machine code, or it might even be something in the OpenStack piece. Not sure yet. I haven't had a chance to kind of chase that down. So, but something to keep in mind if you try this. And then also, so what I do is I make sure I create a specific key for each of these deployments that I do. That way I don't have to worry about something else breaking or some other automation that I have running losing its keys. So just something to keep in mind. Anyway, so we'll come in here. What we'll do is we'll do a source dmachine env, and then I'll just go ahead and say I want to deploy a swarm cluster of 4 nodes on my OpenStack Cloud. So 1, 2, 3, 4, do Docker machine create. Now the -d, which is what driver to use or provider, and again, you can use DigitalOcean, Rackspace, OpenStack, VirtualBox, whatever. So, and we'll do clever naming and just do it swarm 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then we want to make sure we run that in the background so that they don't sit there and do sequentially. It's really important because what this is going to do is it's actually going to provision your instance in your OpenStack Cloud. It's going to SSH onto it. In my case, since I'm using Ubuntu, it's going to do an apt-get update, and then it's going to install Docker and configure it and set up keys for Docker machine to talk, for all the machines to talk back and forth. So, so run those in parallel, and then we'll kick that off, and you can see it getting started here. We can go back over to this guy and we can see swarm 1, 2, 3, and 4 are all coming up. So I'm going to go ahead and pause this and come back in a few minutes when it's done setting everything up. Okay, so now we're kind of finishing it up here, and you can kind of get an idea. You can see what all we did. We detected what kind of provisioner we were using. In my case, these are Ubuntu instances. So we went ahead and it did an apt-get install or apt-get update and installed some things, and then also did the install of Docker. And then you can see the copying of the certs taking place back and forth between the two machines. So this is going to be done in just a second here. And basically, so this part isn't overly overly exciting, right? So we created some OpenStack instances or cloud instances wherever you wanted, and set up some certs and some communication between them. So that, I mean, that's cool and everything else. But now the next step is to go ahead and we want to just do a swarm cluster. So we did four machines here: swarm 1, 2, 3, and 4. And what we want to do is we want to pick one of those to be a manager. So the first step is to go ahead and run this eval, the environment of the swarm 1 node. So I'm going to make swarm 1 my manager in this setup right now. And for now, I'm just going to have one manager, but you can certainly add more. So I'll do an eval docker machine env swarm 1. And so I should show you what that does. If you do an env swarm 1 and you look, you can see it just spits out these environment variables for you to use, so that when you run Docker machine commands or Docker commands, stuff like that, it's using that environment, it's using those particular pieces of information, those variables, to actually execute the commands on that node, right? So we've evaled that. You can see the last line in there is telling you to eval it, so I just wrapped it all up into that little command. So we have that. So now it's actually really quite simple, actually. So we'll do a swarm init, and then advertise ADDR, and then we need to give it that IP address that you see there. So that's the IP address, the accessible IP address of my OpenStack instance. So I'm using provider networks here, so everything's routable, so I don't have to worry about any of that. So that's good. So 172.16, 140, 144, and then we do the same thing for a listen address, except we give it a port as well. So 144, and we're going to give it port 2377. Now, my OpenStack Cloud is configured such that my security rules are everything's open, right? So I'm inside a lab, behind a firewall, all that stuff. So I'm not too concerned about that. If you're in a public cloud, if you're, or if you have, more tight security rules inside of your environment, stuff like that, you'll have to open up, make sure these ports are opened up for the stuff to work, obviously. Either that, or you could go log onto a box in the private network, run all of this from an instance in OpenStack, and have everything just over the private network too, if you want. But anyway, there's all kinds of ways to do it. Just something to keep in mind if you run into troubles. Okay, so Docker Swarm init, advertise address and listen address and our port. We go ahead and we hit that, and that's it. So at this point, we're actually ready to try and add the other nodes and stuff like that, our other swarm nodes that we created here. So you can see swarm initialize current node is now the manager. Add a worker to the swarm, run the following command, which is super simple, right? So all we have to do is use that same eval trick. So, and run this command on each of those machines. So just make it easy, copy that. So eval swarm 2, done. Run on 3. And finally on 4. Okay, so you saw those last 3, they all joined as workers. So now we can do things like we can do a Docker machine ls again, and we can look. And if you look here, you'll see there's our machines, swarm 1, 2, 3, and 4. You'll notice this little asterisk. So this is kind of handy. Sometimes I get confused with all the evals and I forget where I'm at. So it's kind of nice if I do a Docker machine ls, it will tell me what's active in terms of my profile, my environment right now, who I'm talking to. So if I come back, for example, and I go back to the manager, and I run that command again, you can see a little asterisk shows me where I'm at. So that's kind of helpful if you ever get kind of lost, which I sometimes do. So anyway, so that's really about it. We now technically have a swarm cluster. Like I said, 1.12 makes it unbelievably easy. I can't imagine how it would be any easier. And then I can scale this. I can add more OpenStack instances, boot them up, join them into this swarm cluster, just use that same command there. and keep adding workers as many as I want. I can also add more managers, so on and so forth. And that all works. I've played around and kicked the tires on that a number of times, and it works great. So at this point, then you're ready to start creating services to run on your Swarm cluster. I've heard different people talk about problems with, oh, well, the machines, the workers don't talk to each other. I'm not sure what's going on there. The thing that I've noticed is if you forget to actually create an overlay network, then yeah, you could have some problems. The other thing is sometimes people's IP ranges collide with the Docker Bridge IP ranges. So those are the couple of things to keep in mind and look at if you have problems. For me, I just use simple Docker overlay network. So the first step for me is always Docker network create -d overlay, and then I just, in this case, I'll make up a name like SwarmNet, right? And that's pretty much it. So now I have Docker network list. And you can see there's my SwarmNet. It's an overlay, and the scope is appropriate. It's set as a swarm, right? So that's good to go, and we're ready to create services at this point. So I'll probably have a follow-up because I've got some other things that I'm going to do. One of the interesting things, and one of the things that I was working on, was a Cinder Docker driver. At this point, what I would do is I would go and I would deploy that driver and start up that service on each of these nodes, and then go through and create a service that actually uses persistent storage that is Cinder. The thing that's kind of cool about that is that's all kind of independent of how I got here. So this is just one way of building up a cluster, a swarm cluster, and getting it going. You can do that however you want. You can do it on bare metal, whatever, and then follow those steps later. So I'll keep those separate. Service, you can use the Docker Compose file, which is my favorite way to do this, of course, or you can just do the big honking command lines. Anyway, that's a super quick kind of run through. I hope that's useful, and if you haven't tried this before and you're interested, you should give it a shot. Hopefully you'll think it's pretty easy and simple to do. And if you have any feedback, feel free to leave me a comment. Thanks.